of Jesus Christ, it says these things. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. Is that beautiful? That is who Jesus is. See, Jesus is, first of all, the visible discovery of the invisible God. He is the image of the invisible God. The God that we can't see with our eyes or touch with our hands. Jesus came and lived here on the face of this earth as a man so that we could understand him and relate to him and begin to get a bit of a grasp of the Creator and of the heart of our Father. And so we see him interact with people, and we see the compassion that he showed, and we see his great works and the way he interacted, and we get a glimpse. Just a little one. Just a little glimpse of the Father. Because he said, if you have seen me, you've seen the Father. So he was the visible image of the Father. He was also creator. Now that's mind-blowing. We read, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. We also read that speaking of Jesus, he was the firstborn over all creation. By him, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. That is something else. We go all the way back to John chapter 1, and it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. Jesus was there in creation. Now we understand this imagery in the scriptures of Jesus being the Word of God and the spoken expression of the Creator God. And somehow, in all of that understanding, in his pre-incarnate form, Jesus was present at creation, speaking life into all of it. Wow. So when we say Jesus, and we worship Jesus, we are worshiping the Creator of things. The one who, when we look at him, we see him say, no, let the little children come to me. Do not rebuke them. He gives us a little picture of what the Father's like. And the love that God has for us, he's not a God who stands up there with a big stick waiting to beat on us. He's a God who loves us and wants us to come in. And he wants the kids up on his lap, and he wants to give them a hug. That's what the Father's like. And Jesus showed us some of that. He had compassion on the outcasts. Verse 17, it says, he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the sustainer of the universe. Everything that is held together by his power. Sustaining all things. just something that is so far beyond our understanding. And the beautiful thing about that, I love to come across these scientists who will say, well, this we don't understand, and this we don't understand. And because what it does for me is show me that our God is so great that we can't put him into a box. We can't define him down into formulas. He is so far beyond. He is the sustainer of everything. And he is the head of the body, the church. Now, every structure must have leadership. And in the church, Jesus gives that leadership. He rules. He not only rules, but he governs in a unique way. Because he has a heart of compassion and a heart that has sacrificed everything on our behalf. He who knew no sin became sin for us. Can you imagine? Sometimes we don't think, these terms, they roll off our tongue, but when we stop and we meditate on those truths, they can be overwhelming. He knew no sin. That's hard for us to even imagine because as human beings, we are sinful from our childhood. And so when we stop to think, okay, he knew no sin. Okay, so he never lied to mom and dad. He never ever done anything wrong. He never ever abused his work privileges and maybe took a longer break than he should have and got paid for it. He never, and all these things that we look at and we say, okay, that's little stuff. And we understand that in our hearts. Somehow it fits into the mixed up way that we think as human beings. But he knew none of that. And yet he took upon himself the punishment for our sin. He became that in our place. So when we think of Jesus Christ, we think of a God, the Creator God, who is the Father himself, who is invisible, that we can see in him. And he is the sustainer of all things, and he is the head of the church in these things, who sacrificially gave himself for us. In verse 19 it says, God was pleased to have all of his fullness dwell in him. All of it. So it wasn't like, oh, well, he was kind of part of God, or he was a little bit, or he was kind of like. God says he was pleased to have all of his fullness dwell in him. So you can't have fullness if it's only partial. It's all of it, or it's not. And when it says all of his fullness, it means he was completely God. And so God was pleased to have all of his fullness dwell in him. So Jesus is fully God. He's not just a prophet. Oh, he was a prophet, but he was much more than just a prophet. He was a good man, but he was much more than just a good man. In verse 20, through him, God reconciled to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. So, as Jesus sacrificed himself on the cross, and really, he sacrificed himself. That's the thing. We sometimes, we can lose our bearings on this at times and think he was unjustly killed and executed by people who were sinful and evil. And yes, that's true. But they couldn't do it without him willingly laying his life down. They didn't take it from him. He gave it up. There was no reason that he couldn't have. There's a song, he could have called 10,000 angels. Yes, he could have. It would have been over. But we would have been lost forever. Our eternity would have been set from that moment on. And instead, Jesus